Hi, I'm Gabe. In this video, I'm just going to go over my process on how I created this animatic of a time when I was a pizza delivery guy. So what I'm practicing here is storyboarding for animation and how to tell that story clearly. Breaking down my steps, I strongly recommend you start with a script. I know it sounds obvious, but it's pretty tempting to just jump in and start drawing. Then I do thumbnails, start designing characters, doing some roughs, getting some movement in there, and last, I do cleanup. So I didn't go off a script for this, but I went off this old comic I did a few years back. Panel 1, the manager shows the new guy around. Panel 2, manager introduces new guy to all the other workers. Panel 3, gets to talk to one of the other workers. Doesn't go as well as it should. The comic is a short 3-panel comic that's gonna need to be elaborated a bit in order for it to work in animation. I'm gonna add some scenes of why this place isn't really fun to work at, and I can also play around with some funny moments, some gags to accentuate kind of the horrors of this place that this new guy is gonna encounter. I should write a script for this, but usually I have an easier time visualizing my story if I just draw it out. In the professional world, you're gonna always go off a script. Usually will make your life a lot easier. So I tried out a few story ideas. This one was a little bit too cinematic, more camera movement than anything else. It starts with the long pan from outside the restaurant all the way inside. And I just felt it was a little too live action, right? You want something a little bit more exaggerated, a little bit more focused on gags and just a reason why it would be animated over done in live action. So the second one's a little bit more animated, still some camera movements, but there's more gags, funny moments, animated moments that are just funny, where all the other workers are just running past the new guy. They're basically just a blur. But it still doesn't go far enough. I feel like I just need to push it a bit more. The third one is a lot closer to what I'm looking for. I added some character interactions just to kind of show what the job would be like and how he would react. So the story is a bit wackier, but once I get to the rough phase, I'll start exaggerating the movement a bit more. And the extra scenes definitely help kind of elaborate the feeling of this job and the dread. But this one is the one I kind of go forward with. It did take me a few tries to kind of get to this, but you gotta play around with it. Usually the first one is never the right one. Or if it is, it just needs to be kind of fleshed out a bit. So I think this one feels right. The thumbnail stage definitely helps you kind of flesh things out, right? You don't have to pull out detail. You can do things really quickly. It's just going to help you get to the next stage, which for me is designing characters. So now that I've figured out my story and what characters are in it, I can start playing around with some character designs so they're not all just plain mannequins with crosses on their face. I usually like to start with playing around with some different art styles. I could have gone with the same style as the comic, but I feel like I've changed a lot since then, style-wise, so kind of playing around with different variations on the character. So once I find the style that I'm really liking, try to use that same style for all the other characters, right? Similar eye size or head shapes. Do that for all the characters. So I didn't use all the characters I designed, but in case I do need to add a character or I just decide to change a design of an existing character, I can always go back and switch that up. So usually when I'm designing characters, I like to look at reference. For these are pretty simple caricatures of people I work with. Yeah, so now that I have my story and my character design, I can start roughing out my storyboards. So for this project, I used Rough Animator on my iPad Pro. I wanted to be able to take this project with me anywhere, but usually I like Photoshop. I've been starting to use Blender as well. That's just what I like to use, but whatever works for you, I say go for it. So now I just start to roughen the frames, right? Just bring in the frames I did in the thumbnails and start to elaborate on those a bit more, giving them a bit more motion, right? It starts to come alive a bit. So from this point on, it's just keep adding more detail, more frames, more movement. But you always have to remember that your goal is to have things be as clear as possible. And even if you're adding more movement, more detail, as long as the interaction and what's happening is clear, then everything will be easy to follow. So at this point, I'm still rough. It's all about speed, trying to get things in there as quickly as possible. So this is where I start to clean things up, start making those rough thumbnails look more like the character designs, right? With less scratchy lines, more clean artwork. So one thing I start to notice is that the earlier drawings aren't as nice or aren't as good as the later drawings. So usually I tend to go back and try to keep the quality the same throughout, keep it consistent. This is where I also start to add backgrounds as well. And don't cheapen out on the backgrounds. Let the backgrounds kind of tell the story or even amplify what's happening to your character. So I also added a new scene of a customer just not being helped, right? Just to kind of show it's that kind of place. And it's also a good way to kind of break up the story. So the story does start to get a little bit longer than I expected it to, but this new scene isn't very long and it's funny enough. And again, it doesn't really detract from the story, so I left it in. So I only added scenes that didn't mess with the flow and also kind of shows different aspects of this place where the new guy's working at. So now I'm finally at the last scene of the story where the new guy's getting introduced to everybody, nobody seems to care, and he's slowly just realizing this was a mistake. And once the veteran comes and tells him something, he realizes from this moment on, he's messed up. So the frames definitely start to add up. And when you get to clean up, there's a lot of frames to redraw. And depending on how much detail you want to put in these, could definitely take a long time. Once you see the animation or the animatic come together, it's definitely worth it. So one last thing you should probably worry about is timing on how long you should hold movements or how many frames it should be. Definitely helps with making movement look natural. And that's it. I hope that all made sense. Just to go over the steps again, it's the script, thumbnails, character and designs, roughs, and cleanup. So it's not exactly how my first day in the job went, but it's definitely how it felt over time. Yeah, so please let me know what you think. If you liked it or hated it, definitely open to some feedback. So let me know what you think. I'm still not sure if I'm gonna do any more of these, but definitely will do a lot more animatics, right? Just to come up with some cool ideas, test some stuff out, and always improve, right? That's always the goal. So see you on the next one, maybe.